I haven't checked if there are any other Happy Birthday George Washington streams, but I found, to my disgust, that the annual tradition, the annual American tradition of having his farewell speech read out by a member of the Senate has not been chosen. I guess Congress is too busy preparing for war to observe this annual tradition of having Washington's farewell speech read out without comprehension, without shame, nobody commenting on it. So, according to Brave AI, it says, the specific senator who will read George Washington's farewell speech in the US Senate in 2026 has not yet been announced. The reading is traditionally delivered by a senator designated by the Senate Majority Leader and alternates between the two major political parties each year. The event occurs annually on or around February 22nd, Washington's birthday. As of now, which is the 22nd of February, the 2026 reading has not been scheduled and the designated reader will be confirmed closer to the date. It's already here, guys. The tradition began in the late 19th century and continues as a symbolic moment of unity in the Senate. I guess there's no moment of unity in the Senate, is there? For the most current information, check the official US Senate website or C-SPAN's coverage of Senate sessions. I should have a look at YouTube. I actually see your comment, Brent, but I'm going to, before I answer your question, which is no, I'm going to look up for anyone else on YouTube. Even caring that it is his birthday. Oh, I'm the only one. I am the well, there's somebody who's done something 8 hours ago, but it has no views. It's called the channel name is This Daily Archive. Right. No one else, just me in the whole wide world. No one else has seen fit to commemorate the first American president. How very sad, how very forgetful, how very disrespectful. I've spoken to Americans, who, when I say blah, 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 George Washington farewell speech, warned you all against your political parties, look at where you are now, and they say, yeah, I do. I prefer Jefferson. And you think, without the military leadership of George Washington, you wouldn't even have a republic. You'd still be British, like the Canadians. The point is that the American Revolution was about rejecting the British monarchy and coming up with your own propositionation. And a very good thing it is too, because it was founded, obviously, because the early Americans weren't quite happy with the way things were being run. The ostensible reason seemed to be no taxation without representation. And you think, well, that can't really be the reason, You can't really get people to do this sort of thing. Like, oh, we don't like more taxes from our monarch. And obviously, the American Revolution was special in that I think it was about a principle. It was the Republican principle, of course. And we know from all these American monuments, is that the founding fathers were really into the fasces, which is, the symbol of unity, of national unity, which is a bundle of sticks tied by a string, harking back to the story of the father who noticed that his sons were always fighting each other, and then he, told them the story, demonstrated that, all these sticks on their own, which he equated to his sons on their own, were easy to break, but if you put them together in a bundle and tied them up with a stick, it was impossible to break by one person. So, that became the symbol of national unity. And obviously, if we're going to live in a nation, and we all live in nations, we want there to be national unity, because if we were not united, then any usurper, any imperial predator would just come and make the most of our differences and divisions and get us fighting each other and not be protecting ourselves against our internal and external enemies. And we must, of course, first consider who our internal enemies are, and it would be those who are guilty of sedition. Who would be guilty of sedition? It would be the dissidents. What do the dissidents want? They want the opposite of the status quo. And in the time of the founding fathers, the status quo was government by George III, Mad King George. He wasn't even British, he was German. But if you were to think about the Anglo-Saxons, we have to acknowledge that once upon a time these Anglo-Saxons were Saxons, and then they invaded Britain and dominated that island, and then they sent people all over the world to conquer in the name of the British Empire, now known as the Anglo-American Empire, because it is English-speaking. Not German-speaking, but English-speaking. But isn't it interesting that if you look up the racial origins of the white people in America, that there are actually more of them who were German than they were British. Why German? I think it's because Germans at the time were mostly Catholic, and Catholics have lots of children, and the Germans are really the biggest group of Europeans in Europe and sit on the most territory, and cause a lot of trouble for the Russians because of all those Germans in the Volga region of Russia, which I think all these white people thinking, oh, it's never happened before, it must be the Jews, but when you think about the time of Catherine the Great, she actually invited all those Germans to come and farm in the Volga region, because I guess they were known to be great farmers, and the Russians were a bit useless at farming. So they settled in the Volga region. They were allowed to keep their language and their culture and their religion, and doubtless when Hitler decided to expand Germany after the Treaty of Versailles, which was dominated by the American President Woodrow Wilson, whose 14 points was the post-war, the post-Great War order. So he thought these terrible Europeans, they're always fighting each other at the drop of a hat. We're going to break up these empires. We're going to break them up, and we're going to say that every peoples of Europe who can call themselves a people, because they have a common history, a common religion, a common language, will henceforth enjoy the right to national sovereignty. And this was, obviously in response to the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who, if he had lived, would have become the next Austrian emperor. And as we know, empires are full of conquered peoples, and it was actually a Serb who assassinated the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So obviously the Serbs were not happy, and the Serbs are Slavs, and the biggest Slav nation of all is Russia. And Russia at the time was promoting a policy of pan-Slavism, which is basically a kind of, racialized identity for Slavs, saying, we Slavs, we're going to support the Russian Empire because it's the most powerful Slav nation of all, and we're going to be projecting our power that way. Unfortunately, because Russia did all kinds of terrible things to other Slavs, the Poles and other people weren't interested, so Pan-Slavism did not get off the ground. And this is really the first example of race not being capable of not being sufficient to be your religion. I mean, how can it? It's a colour. And even racists would say, well, not every member of our race is to be trusted. I mean, some of them are pretty terrible people indeed. But we just want our race to be, the people enjoying the highest status, because we've been here longest, and there's more of us than the ones who've just arrived on boats and stuff. Why am I talking about the Russians? Oh yes, so I'm saying Catherine the Great basically invited all those Germans into Russia to farm Russian farmland, because the actual Russians just weren't good at doing these things. I guess they couldn't be trusted, and they were all serfs anyway. So and there was trouble freeing the serfs, and all kinds of nihilism. Nihilism actually came from Russia and was being promoted by Russians when I guess they realised that all the rubbish they were forced to believe in was a bunch of lies. So they mass atheism was the rule during the time of Dostoevsky, and I'm trying to remember who wrote War and Peace, Tolstoy, whose views were not strictly Orthodox Christian. So I mean, just get it, white people, that your Christianity was collapsing way back then. And it's only because of all these centuries of, oh no, we can't possibly not be Christian. We'll just pretend to be Christian. Perhaps that'll be enough. And I'm saying, no, it's not enough. Your religion is a working boiler, or an armour, or a piece of weaponry. It's not an accessory. It's not a pair of earrings that a woman might wear with a party frock. It's not a bracelet, it's not a necklace, it's not a belt, it's not a scarf. It's meant to be an armour to protect you, or to be used against your enemy as a weapon. So, for all these white people in the West to keep hoping that Christianity is going to be enough when there are so many historical events that have that is obviously conclusive evidence that Christianity was failing in the time even of the founding fathers. Well, why do you think they rejected Christianity and monarchy? They had to reject monarchy because, well, I guess, King George was mad, and he wasn't even British, and he spoke English with a foreign accent, and yeah, he would go mad, and there would be the Prince Regent, and it was just embarrassing to have a mad king. And also the English had already killed their king before Charles I, and then what the Pilgrim Fathers did, because they were Puritans, and after the restoration of the monarchy, when Charles II became the monarch of Britain again, they were obviously out of favour, and they had to leave the country, and they tried to settle in Leiden in the Netherlands for a while, and then they saw that the liberal Dutch would eventually undermine the Puritanism of their beliefs. So they thought, well, we'll just have to go somewhere else. We can't, rot in Rotterdam and places like that, because of their very liberal culture where anything goes. So they got on the Mayflower, and they arrived at Plymouth Colony, and they tried to be the best Christians they possibly could. But it wasn't that easy, because I have heard of this thing called the Halfway Covenant, which E. Michael Jones told me about, and he was saying, well, he was mocking these Protestants, wasn't he? He was saying, these Puritans, they've been diluting their standards of Christianity since the Halfway Covenant, because of course they arrived, and there were all these Europeans who thought that Puritanism was a bit too Puritan for them, and they didn't want to follow all that stuff, and also there wasn't the organisational structure of government to say you've got to come to church, and if you don't come to church, bad stuff is going to happen to you, and we're going to fine you, and we're going to they didn't have the legal and social structure to enforce all these puritanical beliefs, and the Halfway Covenant was basically a dilution of Puritan principles to just sort of say, well, we're still in existence, we're not as strict as we were before, but we're still a community of Puritans and blah blah. Right, that was the whole point, and that was why E. Michael Jones talked about the Great Awakening as a kind of, these Protestants, they just had to go a bit mad every now and then, because they didn't have this, superstructure of the Catholic Church telling them what to do and how to behave and whatever. And that's why they go mad, and look at the world now, look what the Protestants have done, they're being so nice to the Jews, but we Catholics, we knew how to treat the Jews with our inquisitions, and praying for their conversion and stuff like that. It's the Protestants and their stupid Whig history that has turned the Western world into such a mess, and that was his. Well, that is still his narrative. And in the last few days, I heard him tell off a Catholic for his reference to Novus Ordo Catholics. Like, well, how dare you call your fellow Catholics Novus Ordo? Okay, I've forgotten what I was going to... So you're saying these New Order Catholics must not be referred to by these traditional Catholics who like the traditional Tridentine Mass. They must not be sneered at and looked down upon because it's divisive, and then he started talking about, the purpose of the diocesan bishop, because it's all about territory, right? And he was saying there's no point these Catholics who hate the New Order service, driving miles on a Sunday to go to a church that does the Tridentine Mass in the way that they like it, because you're actually not you're undermining Catholicism by going to a different diocese, probably, and regarding your these New Order Catholics as somehow lower in status because they don't happen to live near a Catholic church that does the Tridentine Latin Mass. But he never answered my question properly. E. Michael Jones didn't, when I said you can't use Catholicism as part of Christian nationalism, because Catholicism is supranational. It's only Protestants who are, in some way thinking about their own nation, because the whole point of Protestantism is basically the king, for example, Henry VIII, who said, "We English, we're not going to listen to you anymore, Pope. We're sick and tired of you bossing us around and issuing interdicts on us. And we're going to be our own Pope from now on, and we're just going to be English, and we're going to, tell you to go jump in the lake, Pope in Rome." And that's basically the narrative of English Protestantism. We're going to be our own Pope. We're going to be looking after our national interests in our own way. So go sling your hook, Pope. And to be fair to the Anglicans, they've done all right. They are still the church in control of the most territory in the world compared to the Catholics. So now we come to the question of whether you're part of Christendom if you're a republic. And this I know will drive a lot of Christians in America mad. And I'm saying, of course you're not part of Christendom, Yank, because your country's a republic. Because Christendom, if it meant anything at all, meant a Europe of Christian kingdoms ruled by absolute monarchs. You don't want that, do you, American? You don't want to have some Catholic monarch to make you go to confession every week, to fine you if you don't go to church, to make you a second-class citizen if you're not the right kind of Christian. You don't want that, do you? Of course not. And we know the Catholics have lost the wars of the Reformation, because the last time the Pope actually crowned a king was Charles V in 1650. So we still have in Europe 5 monarchies. There's the British monarchy, which is Anglican. There's the Swedish monarchy, which is Protestant. There's the Norwegian monarchy, which is also Protestant. And then there is the Belgian monarchy, which is Catholic, and the Spanish monarchy, which is Catholic. I mean, it's a remnant, isn't it? Monarchy is but a remnant. And soon, I don't think the British are going to have a monarchy anymore because of the disgraceful behaviour of Andrew. I don't know, I feel that somebody ought to defend Andrew, who hasn't been found guilty of anything. Will he be getting a fair trial? I don't think so. But his brother, I mean, everybody should just thank God that they don't have a brother like King Charles, who doesn't believe in due process. What's due process? It means, well, being treated as innocent until tried and found guilty. So Andrew isn't going to get anything of that. We already know we live in a society where accusation is as good as a conviction, and Andrew has been convicted. Well, there are quite a few question marks. He was going to fight it, right? He was going to fight it with his lawyers until his late mother, begged him not to and said, "Oh, Andrew, I'll pay all the damages, for that retired American prostitute. Don't you worry, but we mustn't, you mustn't fight it." And like a fool, he agreed. So it just means that, he must have said he was admitted that him refusing to fight it amounts to guilt. When we know that he was confident enough of his position to go on Newsnight, which is, well, quite tough on politicians, to say that he had an alibi on the night in question when he was supposed to have had sex with a 17-year-old, which isn't even a crime because the age of consent in the UK is 16. It's only a crime in California and Florida, but so that would be now a great opportunity to say that it's news to me that the UK is one of the 51st states of America, since that's how you're going to be treating us. He could have said all kinds of things, but he didn't, because he allowed his mother to persuade him not to fight the case. So now everybody thinks he's guilty, and now they're going to convict him with or without a trial, and probably they hope he'll kill himself or arrange to look as if he killed himself. So I guess there's not much point in being a member of the royal family, because it just makes you have to pay millions of pounds to retired American prostitutes who didn't even ask you for payment at the time. So I just don't see the point in being a royal when you have fewer rights than your subjects. And we already know that you can't inherit the throne if you're not an Anglican, and there's not much point to being an Anglican anymore, because it's all fake and gay, isn't it? But the only reason why Britain still calls itself nominally Christian is because the British monarch needs to be anointed by the Archbishop of Canterbury during his coronation. That's basically it. And who believes in that sort of thing anyway? Nobody does. But of course the British monarchy is very, very useful to the Americans, because it's through the British Empire that America gets to, gets to establish its military and naval bases in Canada and Australia and all kinds of places, Chagos Islands, whatever. So Britain is still useful. I would like Europeans to just tell America to go sling their hook and take their stuff back to America to rebuild their country and deal with any problems or rebellions who don't like the new one-party state that I am recommending that Trump impose, because that's what George Washington warned them about. And it's true, isn't it? The culture war in America is really a culture war being promoted by having these two political parties that are fundamentally unprincipled. So this is the most important thing, really, that Washington said in his farewell speech, for as far as I'm concerned, because, when you talk about a one-party state, people accuse you of being a Nazi or a fascist or a commie, and now I can say it's a Washingtonian idea. It's how America can go back to their Washingtonian roots by reading the farewell speech on his birthday, but it's dismaying indeed that it's his birthday already, and no senator has been found to read his speech in the Senate. Are they just going to dispense with this? They're just going to break this tradition because nobody wants to know how much of his advice has been ignored? I think Washington did read the Quran. I think, well, Jefferson definitely did. He probably did make the others read it. Okay, I have spoken. Well, according to this, it says I've only spoken for 9 minutes. I'm sure I've spoken longer. So, this is a response to the topics discussed on Chris Howard's stream, and he did talk about. Well, he did say he wanted it on a postcard what I proposed, and I'm saying, I'll just. I mean, I did say in the chat, slavery would have to be reintroduced. It's not being forbidden in either the Bible or the Quran, and you needed to regulate your labour relations and treat people, lower the status of some people and incentivize them to work harder. But with manumission, under Islam, all slaves have the right to manumission, which is, of course, correct, as the Romans discovered. The Greeks, well, they do say that some ancient Greeks did give their slaves manumission, but it wasn't a kind of policy. But the Romans sort of who came later understood that you really must incentivize even your slaves to work, because if you say you're going to be my slave forever, they really will just do the minimum of work required and be really stupid and annoying. But if you said, I will give you money if you work hard, and when you have a certain amount of money, well, when you work, okay, I'm not sure how the thing works, but I mean, obviously, manumitted slaves do need some kind of savings to, go out and live independently. So, my proposal is to open accounts for slaves with the ownership of the slave vested in the government, who hires out the slave to hirers of slaves, and this gives them protection. You mustn't damage government property. There will be slave visitors to visit the slave to ensure that the slave isn't being abused and is working properly. And that will be the protection of for the slaves, and obviously the hirers of slave will be paying the government, and the government will be transferring this amount paid to them into the account of the slave, and depending on what the amount of manumission is, and this would be different for different slaves, taking into account their different circumstances, and then once you reach the amount, you become free. You might wish to work a bit longer to build up a nest egg for your, deposit for your new property or something. So that would be my proposal on how to run slavery. Brent, I don't know why you go through this neurotic habit of deleting your comments. I guess it's habit. Yes, nobody wants to be a slave, Brent, but, nobody wants to be a prisoner, but prisoners also should have rights. My point is that it is a necessary institution because it's the only way to make workfare work properly. And prostitution would be regulated under secular Quranism. There would be licensed brothels and red light districts, and that would be the only kind of extramarital sex that would be allowed, because and the rest of heterosexual sex would be provided by wives. So it's either prostitutes, if you're not married to them, licensed prostitutes, and your wife, or wives, because you'd be allowed a max of 4 wives if you can afford them. And as for women who are neither prostitutes nor slaves, they are not to be supplying sex of any kind at all. Not that there would be any bedroom police, but if any of these unmarried women have bastards without a marriage license, then they will be attracting corporal punishment of 100 lashes per bastard birth. No, slavery is an institution like marriage and prostitution, and I don't care if you don't like it. It hasn't been forbidden in the Bible or the Quran. It's probably because you're Anglo-Saxon and you're so, Anglo-American, and that's why you're so proud that you forbade something allowed by God. Fancy you, Brent, not knowing that religion is about the regulation of gender relations, and this means sexual relations, because this has a bearing on the production of the next generation of your labour force. Fancy you not being able to put 2 and 2 together and making 4. Yes, of course, religion is all about sex and violence and law and war. You think it's some nicey thing because of your Christian background, your infantile Christian background, which thank goodness you've gotten over, or haven't you? So, what else was mentioned? Yes, yes, we've done prostitution, we've done slavery, we've done the one party state, which is absolutely necessary to maintain a one party theocracy. So now we come to the problem of all these Christians yowling and squalling. We can't possibly have a theocracy. Why not? Don't you believe in God? And if you don't believe in God, why call yourself Christian? Hypocrite. So these hypocrites and atheists calling themselves Christian are the problem. And so my job is to call them out, really. And that's why they avoid me. You know, what's his name? Oh, I think we've lost the... lost the picture. We've got it back again. So none of these Christian men want to talk to me. Mark was there. He was talking about his boomer parents and whatever, and yeah, I just wish they actually have a list of questions, like, you know, and the most obvious one would be, under secular Quranism, can we do this? Can we do that? And what's it all? Oh, I mean, they could do that, but they never ever ask the obvious question, because I guess they're too afraid to be seen to be taking the idea seriously. But I mean, the point is that it is undeniable that the founding fathers were proto-Muslim. Proto meaning, well, not quite Muslim, but getting there, you know, with the First Amendment and stuff, because if you do read the Quran, which I know that, you know, Mark was, you know, probably too full of hatred to, you know, oh, it's boring, it's, you know, stories, it was boring, you know, it just goes, you know, maybe you're not a great reader, you know, so, and also if you're full of hatred, then of course you're not going to finish it, and you think it's stupid. It's like, oh, look at these Muslims, you know, from their shithole countries, we don't want them here, we're not going to read their, you know, shit book, right? So they can't get over themselves. So but you would have thought that, you know, if you've been to a good university, you would think, well, I may not like them, but let's read the book. But I know this sort of idolization of their dumb opinions and their dumb emotions and their stupid moods. It's why I still hate those people, hate them, so I can't read their book. And what if somebody finds me reading the Quran? They'll think I'm a terrorist, and where would I be? So, these are the problems of these, you know, infantilized American men of fighting age, but they're just too stupid to work these things out, right? Just too dumb and too scared and too full of hate and too full of their dumb emotions that they just want to keep, you know, talking about, and the TLC, and they can never get to the point, and you know, they just talk their stupid shit, 3 hours of talking, and then they might just say, oh, Nick Fuentes, and then they talk more shit and stupid and rubbish nonsense, and then they go, Christian nationalism, and then they end the stream after more, you know, stupid shit. Yeah, so the First Amendment is supported by the Quran, chapter 2, verse 256. It was a Muslim, a Pakistani Muslim, who said, the Quran doesn't even mention blasphemy. It's just this stupid stuff that, these Muslims, because they don't get free speech either. And I am very happy to say, and they can't even challenge me on this, I'm saying that my interpretation of the Quran is better than any previous interpretation of the Quran. I mean, are they going to sort of say, but the Umayyad Caliphate, the Abbasid Caliphate, or whatever, caliphate they can think of, they had a better interpretation? And I say, right, really? Where are they now? Are they extinct? Didn't they crash and burn? Which must have meant that their interpretation was shit. And mine will be better. So all I have to do is sell it to Trump, right? I have to sell it to Trump and say, look, Mr. President, if you want your legacy to be a great one and a good one, you'll have to openly consider secular Quranism. But I suppose I could get Tucker. Maybe some of you people can say to Tucker, why don't you fly in into the UK and interview this secular Quranism woman, or just talk to me about it on a stream. That'll do, and stop all this environmentally damaging flying around, and ask me a list of questions that you prepared after reading Secular Quranism, available on Amazon, which is a very short book, much shorter than the Quran. So it's very simple, and it won't do that much violence to your constitution, because it will, all Trump has to do is abolish all the political parties and say that there's only one National Party of America, maybe call it the NPA, with the stated principle of governing in the national interest. And once you agree the principle of governing in the national interest, then you'll have to say, well, we Americans, we need a functioning moral system, because liberalism it's not even codified, and neither is Christianity, and we need a codified moral system. And codification basically means, it's like the Ten Commandments, it's derived from the book of Deuteronomy, and that's the 10, so it makes them easy to remember. Another example of codification is the 7 Noahide laws, and another one is the 13 principles of Judaism, and another one is the 5 pillars of Islam. So that is codification in a nutshell. So how's it going to be done? It will be a job for the US Supreme Court. I think there are 7 or 9 of them, and they all have to read the Quran, ignore the threats and promises of God and the stories, and just identify the commandments of Allah. So, and they have to be identified, listed, and numbered. Not all of them are capable of being made into legislation, but just agree. Grammatically, it's quite easy, right? The rules of grammar for identifying commands. It has to be the vocative, right? It means that it's addressing you, it's telling you to do stuff, admonish, refrain from, or whatever. So it's easy. Easy. Look at the grammar, so simple. The exercise, so simple. So do it. So SCOTUS can go through the Quran, and then the rest of the world will read it. We'll do the same thing, because, obviously the justices would have to agree that, it's this verse or that verse, and, that is an actual commandment that is capable of being made into legislation, because they all have to be sent to Congress to be made into legislation. So it's all made into legislation, and that would implicitly repeal anything that it is against. The new lot of laws. So that's it. It's not that hard. I mean, if there's any constitutional lawyer, they'll know exactly what I mean. All right, I think I've said what I want to say about Washington. I mean, it's just disgraceful that nobody cares, and that no senator has been yet named to read the speech. Maybe Trump intends to break with that tradition, which I think is deeply sinister. So, for Americans to go back to their first principles, and of course their most important first principle is the First Amendment, because it's when the Americans had their First Amendment that made all the Europeans think, we want that too. We want our First Amendment rights too in Europe. And if you want to blame anyone at all for the disbelief in Christianity, then you would have to blame the Founding Fathers. They were the ones who separated the church from their state and began this lapse into heretical Unitarianism. Oh yes, this is quite important. And to do with people like Sam Tidderman, who is now a Unitarian, but is forced, probably by his wife, to send his children to a Trinitarian church, because I guess his wife is Trinitarian, and his wife, doesn't agree with the newfangled rituals of the Unitarian church. I've been to a Unitarian service. It was a bit weird. And it's usually conducted by an American woman, and it just doesn't seem the thing. And people, I get it why Christians who like the old stuff, when they want to go back to their roots, they'll always think, the first stop is Catholicism, because it's old, and then they realise that the Catholic Church is fake and gay, and then they think, oh, maybe Orthodox Christianity will be better because of John Chrysostom and his, really based arguments about how we should be treating the Jews, which is to hate them. So that is, the obvious appeal of Orthodox Christianity to white nationalists, or what you call ortho bros, who I feel sorry for them, really, because, it's so strict in Orthodox Christianity that Orthodox Christians are not even supposed to enter the places of religious worship of other kinds of Christian. And they're certainly not supposed to marry non-Orthodox Christian women. So I guess they'll just be, joining their Orthodox churches to be gay with each other or something, and that's not going to be helpful to the white birth rate. So, out of the frying pan into the fire, Christo morons. So, And you know, finally, no, two more things. So Sam complained about his children being bullied at Sunday school for, you know, because their father's a heretic, and obviously word has got round that Sam's a Unitarian, which is obviously heresy to Trinitarians, and once upon a time Unitarians would be burned at the stake like Michael Servetus. So I'm sure, you know, mean people in Sam Tidman's children's church would be, you know, would relish saying that to his children. And so Sam is now stuck between a rock and a hard place. Maybe he should have just, you know, shut up about, well, I don't really believe in the Trinity, but, you know, I'm just going to the church that my wife likes, you know, just to keep the peace and, you know, be middle class and Christian, you know, that kind of thing. I'm going to blow my nose, and I know to mute. I have to mute two things. Yeah, I had to click two buttons in order to mute myself. I hope you didn't hear me blow my nose loudly. So back to Sam Tidman. So, you know, tactically maybe he should have just shut up about his disbelief in the Trinity, and so he can, you know, not subject his children to, you know, being bullied by the Trinitarians, because by deciding to remain Christian, by declaring himself to be a Unitarian Christian, he has lowered himself in the eyes of the Trinitarian Christians because of, you know, what happened to Michael Servetus. So in order to raise himself in status, he would have to convert to Islam. And this is really a delicious dilemma for Sam, really. You know, do you really, you know, take the afterlife seriously enough to actually do that? I mean, what's your wife going to do? She's going to, well, she might have a few things to say. So we'll see how Sam resolves the situation to his own, you know, whether to his own satisfaction. But I think he's rather painted himself into a corner. But he should be speaking to me, really, because I'll just say, well, just become a secular Quranist, and then you will actually raise your status without having to, you know, hang out with those brown people in, you know, mosques and, you know, places like that. Now, there was another important thing that I've forgotten now. Oh, yes, actually it follows on logically from what I've been saying. I've been making the point that American husbands have been made neurotic and now remain in denial because they half realise that their First Amendment rights have been removed by their wives. Their wives can divorce them under the rules of no fault divorce, and that would be devastating, you know. For any man, particularly a man who regards himself as, you know, high status and who, you know, wants to keep in touch with his children. So I guess that's why they come online and, you know, talk nonsense to each other for hours on end and never get to the point. And I'm trying to help them, and I'm saying, I have a plan. I have a cunning plan for you to restore your First Amendment rights, but you have to do what I say. You have to file a class action of divorced husbands whose wives have said they are divorcing them. They divorced them because they supported Trump. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Trump is being blackmailed by his wife, saying, "Well, if I divorce you, you're toast." Who knows? I mean, we have all kinds of theories about why the president is acting in this rather alarmingly capricious way. It could be that Melania is saying, "I'm going to divorce you if you don't do what I say. And then you really will be toast." So I'm saying, this is how American husbands get back their First Amendment rights, and it is to file a class action of divorced husbands whose wives are on record for saying they're going to divorce them for supporting Trump, and then apply to the federal court for judicially reviewing judicially reviewing no-fault divorce. And of course, the idea is to say no-fault divorce is against the Constitution because of these frightened, neurotic American husbands not even daring to discuss politics in their own home for fear of their wives divorcing them. It mustn't be allowed. And that's how we do it. So this is my birthday present to Americans. And I really think I am a genius, an underappreciated genius. I mean, how many? It just says one person is watching now. So obviously, I'm such a genius that YouTube have decided to suppress my channel, and Mark, who was sort of so spurgy on Chris Howard's channel, he didn't want to join me. Nobody wants to talk to me directly. They can only deal with what I say at one remove. They don't even, subscribe to my channel. They're too scared to even post comments. Or even if they did, AI censor would delete them. So, I think I'm being quite straightforward in what I'm saying. I'm not using complicated words. I don't know what you mean, Brent, by saying Piccadilly Square. We don't have a Piccadilly Square here. You're probably confusing Leicester Square with Piccadilly Circus. All right, have I think I've said all the important things that I want to say, called out the ortho bros for being the Christo morons like Joseph, explained the reasons why so many members of the TLC don't want to speak to me directly, and so my next move will be really to kind of appear on Jacob's channel and admonish those Jews for pandering to these American pagans who don't even know they're American pagans because nobody told them, not even the Muslims who are Muslim morons, who don't even know about the existence of chapter 18 verse 4 of the Quran until I rolled up and told them, and of course they would instantly forget. And chapter 18 verse 4 commands Muslims to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son. And I do keep asking them, I mean, they say things like, oh, we've done it. It's like, no, when did you ever do it? Is it on record that you did it somewhere? In your 1400 years of Muslim history, well, when did you ever do it? You never cared about these Christians in Europe. You never invited them to Islam because you didn't like them, did you? But if you had managed to invite them to Islam, you wouldn't be the eternal victims of Western imperialism and now too ashamed to admit it. So I think I've finished all I want to say. Thank you, the very few special and elite people who came by to post in my comment in my live chat. It's a pity, Brent, you keep deleting your comments because some of them are quite interesting. But I guess so many men are so neurotic. But it is caused by the inability to express what you believe to be the truth for fear of the consequences, and then the shame of it, the shame of admitting that you are all afraid of your wives. It's not just Jews or Big Brother, CIA, it's your wives. So, well, thank you for coming by, listening, understanding, and hopefully, before too long, heeding and actually discussing all the points I raise with each other on your channels instead of the nonsense you talk to each other, which I know is a sign of your neurosis and psychosis. And I feel deeply sorry for you, but you just need to say what you believe to be the truth in order to reconnect with the masculinity that you're supposed to represent.